Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and this week's guest is Darcia Narvaez. She is an amazing woman, author of Neurobiology and the Development of Human Morality, Evolution, Culture, and Wisdom. She's the former editor of the Journal of Moral Education. She serves on the board of the Attachment Parenting International Organization, and she's also the founder of the Evolved Nest Initiative. And we're going to be talking about those things. It's going to be a phenomenal conversation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Darcia, it is such a wonderful gift to have you here and to be able to dive into these inner explorations that we've been having in order to show that, they're more common than we think. We're often bereft of conversing about what's going on inside of us to others because we think we'll be deemed as crazy, weird, insane, something like that. We need to broach that. We need to talk about things that are going on inside because that's really where the keys are for the external living in its best fashion, practicing the best opportunities, right? So thanks again for being here and sharing and hopefully you'll be sharing your insight and wisdom in ways that our audience haven't heard yet.
Thank you so much for having me, Zen. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, cool. It's really an honor for both of us. It's shared, right? Isn't that the thing about, connection? You find people that are of a similar ilk and you start talking about things and you dive in and you figure out how to talk the same language.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So in that process and with your obvious delving into psychology, oh, I forgot to mention you are a professor emerita at the University of Notre Dame. So with that, that also gives a huge level of credence, right? Or credulity. Uh, in that, though, in pursuing the realms of psychology, you've had to have had some initial questions and experiences when you were younger uh, that prompted that. Maybe I'm wrong. I doubt it. When did those begin to happen? And what were they like?
Well, my work today is focusing a lot on the evolved nest and our species' way of raising the young, the babies especially, uh,
Hmm.
that foster a healthy neurobiology and a compassionate human nature. We kind of forgot it in the industrialized world. And so I'm trying to work on getting people back on track to a wellness-informed pathway of development and just maintaining our compassionate nature that then
Sure.
is
And quite the noble cause. I mean, we've got this coming out of the mm, challenge we've had in the last few years and the shifts and the changes and all those kinds of things and creating what many are calling a new normal in a way that works for all rather than just a few. So this, and we need to start with the kids, right? And how we do that. So when you were younger, though, what did you find was maybe it was something that was missing that you saw ought to be there and began exploring that? What did initiate all of this? What was your youth like?
Yes, so that's what I'm getting to is the evolved nest comes out of my first memory and early experience. My first memory is of my brother. Um, I was playing with some toys and he took one of them, and then I complained to my father. He took my toy, and my father then flew into a rage, this is my recollection, and beat him up. And I was like, what happened? What's going on? This is not right.
Yeah,
Something's
that's not
wrong.
normal.
Hmm. But it was normal in those days. I mean, to spank your children, which is very harmful in the
Well, granted.
neurobiologically and psychologically,
And
etc.
we learn that that's love to us, which is unfortunate.
Right, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just trauma being transferred to the child from the
Mm.
adult's own experience. So, yeah, my dad was thrown in a closet when he was bad as a child. So he he didn't learn,
We
you know.
live what we learn unless we are asked to be different.
Yeah. And then I spent half my childhood in other countries, mostly so-called third world countries,
Hmm.
where children my age were on street corners selling gum, for example, in rags, you know, and I was going to school, and why are they, what's going on with the world? And we'd be away for a year and come home to Minnesota for 2 years and then go away again for a year in a different country. And so the whole world seemed very mixed up. The overabundance of things in the States and the minimal kind of materialism in the
Hmm.
other places. Now, I was just a kid, so I noticed the superficial things. Uh,
And
and
those were most obvious, right?
yeah, those were obvious to me. Yeah, so, but in that, it was a harsh family environment too. So it was hard to feel, you know, safe.
Mm.
But early on, I felt accompanied by, and I called that accompaniment God. God was always there.
Always
And
is. We just don't know.
yeah, and so I would talk to God in my head, and, you know, and I would feel okay. And anyway, always accompanied is how I felt by the spiritual world.
Hmm. Which is a phenomenal thing is looking back now. And yet it's so natural for most kids to have that additional passenger, if you will, to talk to and to reflect with. Whether we
Yeah.
realize it or not, there's always, and I think maybe you can explore this a little bit. Is that to due to the true innocence and naivety and the understanding or the lack of understanding of the barriers that are put upon us as we grow into adulthood, where that kind of activity is set to the side?
Well, until about age 7, we are very attuned to the spiritual realm, the other realms. We can see it's more transparent to us, more fluid, more available. Also,
Hmm.
in late adulthood, elderhood, there's more transparency among the realms and coordination or awareness. And once and that's why having grandparents taking care of the young children, they're kind of tuned in to the
Oh
bigger
yeah, yeah,
picture,
yeah.
you
I
know, and they
totally
love
get
each
it. And
other.
and we're both ends of that spectrum are close to, for lack of a better, I'll just call it the nothingness from which we come and go.
The transformation of life to
Yeah,
death or death to life. Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
So yeah, that's so cool. So, but then there's a shift cognitively in the child, and that's why a lot of societies start training or the child at 7 or 8 to do whatever the more adult activities are. But before then, you're
mhm.
sort of in this hypnotic state and you're in the flow and you just want to have children immersed in what the community's activities are. And they learn so quickly and they want to be a community member, you know, and so you don't punish them or anything. You don't, um,
They
uh,
just want to have fun. They're
yeah,
curious and they want to have fun.
and they want to participate. The
Yeah.
1 year old wants to fold the clothes and help you with the laundry. They make a mess of it, but you want to encourage them because there seems to be a sensitive period for wanting to do chores.
And even as
Wait.
adults, we get a job with certain skills that are necessary. Yeah, we think we know how to do it, but there's still the learning.
Yeah, there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't want to interfere with that early instinct to help and be a member of the family or community because then when they're teenagers, they don't want to help you because they didn't build the habit up when during that sensitive period. So,
Very true. Very true. And I experienced that with my adoptive father. And he was always there mornings and afternoons when I get, or evenings when I come home from school or sports practice, but he worked third shift. And so there were some, the activities that we had available. He did attempt, but by the time he did, I had that I'm okay by myself. I got friends. I'm going to do things, and I really don't want to spend a whole time with you. I regret that as an adult. now because there was a lot of opportunities I passed up.
Yeah. We have to forgive ourselves,
Hmm.
make a lot of mistakes along the way.
Oh, isn't that the biggie, right? And seeing the mistakes aren't as not mistakes, just part of the learning curve.
Right. Yeah. Awakening us to new parts of ourselves or to the world in different ways. Yeah.
Sure.
I spent my life every 8 years or so. It's like the rug is pulled out and my whole worldview shifts. It's been the way
I
all
mean, the
the way.
example of the Phoenix, right? You crash and burn and rise again.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's but you have to have faith that it's going to work out. It's things are going to get back together again, right? Some deep sense of that.
Do you find that having gone through that a number of times, and I can relate as I've been there too, you begin to recognize a process and a pattern and the triggers, or at least the initiations of that process are certain things. And over time, the uncomfortableness of it becomes a bit more comfortable because you recognize the process and you know what the outcome is going to be, or at least how you're going to feel with the outcome because you process and evolve through it.
Yeah, and you have a deeper sense of self. It forces you into realizing, these things are not fixed. That life
Mhm.
is fluid, and my deeper self, the spiritual self, is fine. All these, trappings of a life, can come and go. But
Yeah,
my deeper self
yeah,
is fine.
yeah, those are all kind of mental constructs, right? Based on how we're programmed, our cultural memes and biological um, historical evidence that, from our um lineage.
Well, I think we have to get away from the mental stuff, right? It has to be deeper, right? It has to be the embodied sense of it's not rational. It's the deeper way of being,
No,
the flow of things, right? The mental stuff can get us off track. We get stuck in our heads.
and we lose touch with our body because of that. And speaking of, um, there's words that came out of my mouth several years ago that was just I was amazed at listening to myself. You know how sometimes those phrases or sentences just come out of your mouth where you combine all kinds of things and it just comes out and it's like, wow, where'd that come from? Right. So we what I said was we cannot think our way through a system built on vibrations. We've got to sense our way through it.
Hmm.
And that leads to incorporating the body. You're familiar with the indigenous philosophy of the three brain system, I'm sure. The gut, the heart, and the head, and that the gut is the intuition. That's where we are connected. And we ignore that. Those subtle prompts that we get. It's like, and we second guess ourselves and go back up into the head and make choices on what we think we know rather than sensing our way through it. How, with your understanding of that, how does that apply to this developmental process that we go through that we can nurture each other in ways that might be more applicable?
Well, the evolved nest is a transdisciplinary idea that's built from integration of multiple sciences and our ancestral wisdom. uh,
Mm,
that we have this way of raising the young, and all animals have a nest for their young that's matches up with the maturational progress of their young. And ours is especially important because we're like fetuses of other animals for the first 2 years of life. And so all sorts of systems are trying to figure out how to
mhm.
establish parameters and how they're
Right.
going to
Because
function.
energetically, we're still wide open. Quantum physics even says, we're all energy. There's no matter.
Mhm. Yeah. But if you undercare for a child, you don't provide the evolved nest. What you do is you're undermining the normal process of unfolding of that unique spirit, that uniqueness of that child. You're putting wounds, you're wounding them, and then that starts to shut things down and gets them disconnected from their gut,
Right.
their heart, their spirit. And then they tend to be in a bracing mode, easily triggered, because that's how the the biology works. So when your
Right.
stress response kicks in, the blood flow shifts away from your higher order thinking, away from your openness to things, and into, mobilizing for fight or flight, or even shutting down if it gets too bad, and you just dissociate and you're not there anymore, right? And you're some
Mhm.
alternative space. So it's really important to provide the nurturing to the young so that they actually can follow their inner guide, their
Sure.
inner compass. We're born with a very intelligent system, and it's just, the child has
Supercomputer.
well, a child has to learn how to, negotiate integrate everything, the body,
Right.
the spirit, et cetera, and
Well, as we
experience.
spoke, before we came on, this notion of we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. That seems to apply to this. And I speak the cosmic consciousness, that's the supercomputer that we're connected to with a direct line to information about ourselves. Not necessarily about anybody else, because we can't know that until we fully know ourselves. Would you agree with that?
I'm not so sure about that because I think what we undermine when we don't provide the nest to the young is their development of their receptive intelligence.
Hmm.
We are members of the Earth community, and we evolved to be able to recognize the signals from animals and from the winds and from, the
Right.
seasons and all. And you're just aware and you're intertwined and tangled with life,
Sure.
not just humans, right? The non-human or the other than human, that intelligence is, not just ours. It's being open and, in
Well,
the
it's
flow.
ubiquitous. It's always available, at least from my experience and yours too. And we're encouraging others to explore that through this conversation that we're having.
And
In
we
that,
are created from our experience. Our relationships foster ourselves. We don't
Mhm.
become ourselves unless we're in and webbed,
Right,
entangled with
right.
others. So
So we're kind of assimilationists, right?
yeah, but it's
Where
more
we
than
look
that.
and we
Yeah,
absorb and
yeah.
we translate and
Accommodate.
we take everything in, figure out what's ours, what we can own, and what's not, and evolve from there in a shared experience of what is and perhaps even what might be.
And I'm very intrigued with the shape shifting that our distant ancestors used to be able to do automatically. Even there's records of this in the civilizations in the early, where they go to a temple and then they'd shape shift into with this god or other kinds of beings. But our hunter-gatherer cousins can do this. Native Americans talk about it. You take the mind of the beaver, you take in and you become one with this animal, with the bear, and that you realize yourself is permeable. You have this common self with all of life. You're just
Mhm.
part of the flow, right? So that individualism that gets a little bit too self-contained and too rigid and fixed,
Sure.
that's a problem, right? So.
It is. Now, would you say that has to do with the choice of where we put our attention, intention, and interactions from there?
Yeah, I think that's important. And so when you undercare for a child, you've now shifted their attention from following their inner guidance to external. Oh, am I going to get punished? Oh,
Right.
tell me what to do because I've lost connection to the inner guide, right? The spiritual
Mhm.
guide, the however you want to call it, the psychic guide. And so then your attention is easily triggered away from into fear and oh no, those people, they're green, be
Right.
scared, whatever it
And-
is. So everything gets disrupted, dysregulated, and
Sure.
mixed up.
And we don't realize it's false evidence appearing real, but it's
Yeah.
what we're taught. Now, speaking of what we're taught, and you being in the educational system, I taught high school for a number of years as well in a variety of different settings and at different levels, from self-contained special ed to honors classes in English. Um,
I was a classroom teacher also.
Sweet. So, from an American perspective, we kind of missed the boat. We put kids in a box and test them to facts and things that we deliver and their ability to regurgitate without a whole lot of critical thinking until they get much older. Now, from my experience, the things that are missing in that is an aspect of what I call, and many do as well, holistic education. Now, the Australians started in with that in the late 90s, I think, but yet they still didn't include the fuller aspect that I think is necessary, and that's mind, body, spirit, planet, and cosmos. We reference all of those things and how, as adults, we're curious and we explore other things like human design and astrology and um, numerology, those kinds of things to try and figure out maybe or get reflections of who we might be in more appropriate ways rather than who, the imposter syndrome that often shows up because of that old programming. Do you see that aspect of holistic education beginning to surface more as our educational systems evolve, at least here in America? I think Russia, well, the USSR, from what my wife had explained to me, she grew up there. She was tagged at or um, interviewed, I guess, at 5 and given the choice of whether she wanted to be a gymnast or pianist, and
Wow.
she chose piano. So she went through the entire system being educated as a piano pedagogue and graduating from, I think it was Mussorgsky College in St. Petersburg, eventually, then Leningrad.
Wow.
Phenomenal education, well-rounded, much more than I've ever experienced in the US as far as how they train people to be their best. We don't do that here. And I wonder if that's part of this conflict that had seemed to evolve because of perhaps the envy of others here and that kind of attention that's paid to the youth and how they evolve from there. Now, I'm certain there's political differences and things like that. However, the nature nurture aspect of that, it seems to be more cohesive rather than just the nurture stuff that most Western educational systems are based on.
Well, our education system in the States was built on preparing kids for factory work.
Right. Yeah, we can thank Dewey for that, right? In the 1940s, I think, late
It was
30s, early
before
40s.
that. It was before that. When all the immigrants came flooding in the 1800s, right? They had to do
Mm,
something with the children, and
right.
and anyway, it moved into control, obedience, and that's it.
Right.
So there's a lot missing in the well, I mean, a lot of schools. I don't know how things are now. I'm kind of distant from it. I used to be a classroom teacher, and
We've matured a little bit and
yeah.
just ourselves, right?
Yeah, so I think I always use the hunter-gatherer civilization as a guide for baselines for what helps us thrive, because some of those societies are still around. They've been around for 150,000 years or longer, and they know how to, live well on Earth and not
Yes.
destructively, and they know how to raise children, which is evolvedness, which is soothing prenatal, birth, and postnatal experiences. We call that perinatal.
Hmm.
Breastfeeding for several years, lots of affectionate touch, a welcoming social climate so that you feel like you belong and you enhance one another. And they love to make babies laugh, and everyone's, inner kind of joy is enhanced. Multiple adult caregivers, because babies need 24/7 presence, and
Hmm.
that's too much for one mother or one mother and father. And then self-directed play.
That
That's
gets back to the
organized.
village raises the child, right?
Right. Yeah. Nature immersion and connection so that you feel like you're part of the earth community and you know this landscape so well, and you honor the animals and plants around you. And then regular healing practices, because humans make choices. They don't have only instincts, but they have, the ability to make choices, and they make some bad choices and do things that get them out of balance, mentally, physically, or relationally.
Well, we have to explore our boundaries, right? But to figure out where they are, we've got to reach and sometimes surpass the safety zone in order
Yeah.
to know where it is.
Right. And so children in hunter-gatherer civilization have a lot of freedom. So children are, they don't There's no coercion. There's just no coercion among relationships. That's grounds for breaking the relationship. So
Mhm.
it's a great, deep honoring of agency, of
Sure.
inner agency. Each person has their own life to live. How are you going to interfere with that? Then you kind of wreck them as a child when you start
Right.
interfering. So,
Well, I'm
yeah.
part of a world or a global peace organization or movement called Live and Let Live. Our premises are based on two principles, a moral and a legal. The moral is be an excellent human, support the aspirations that embody loving and being loved. And the legal aspect of it, or legal principle, is don't aggress. And long term, the objective is to calibrate the law to remove aggression, of which there is plenty of in it. Um, a lot of those things that come from moral codes that people live by that they push into the law. Now, how do we, or how do you see these layers of starting with the hunter-gatherers? Because we still are. That's our basic nature, right? I think that's the point that you're making. With all these different layers that we've got on top of that basic nature now, how do you see this co-creation of a new normal that works for all of us, since we've all, been affected by this recent event? How do we recover from that, restore, and learn about this ultimate deeper connection that we have with each other and with the earth? Because every cell in our body comes from Mother Earth. The nutrition we get, whether it's plants or animals, that's still, we're nurtured by that. We've forgotten, I think. We expect, we go to the store, buy stuff, we don't think about anything other than our own self-gratification. How do we look at those layers from, the politics, the industrial, the technology, the AI now, and begin to incorporate those perhaps in more subtle ways initially, that rather than trying to lump it all together and navigate through it, not knowing what the hell we're doing?
Well, one of the critical things that happens when you don't nest children, so you don't touch them enough, you're leaving them to cry, leaving them in distress, or intentionally imposing distress,
Mhm.
is the right hemisphere of the brain is underdeveloped then. That's scheduled to grow more rapidly in early life and then also throughout childhood, but especially in those early years, it's the seat of our social and emotional intelligence, our receptive intelligence to the world, natural world, our
Mhm.
empathy or higher consciousness. A lot of that is governed initially, especially by the right hemisphere. And so we have all these adults, and then you send kids to school and you push the left hemisphere, reading and thinking linearly and all that,
Right.
and
And life is anything but linear.
right, but that's what they get rewarded for. And so you have all these adults who have underdeveloped right hemispheres and overdeveloped and over controlling left
Mhm.
hemispheres, the ones that, impose its will on the world, that's what it
It's
wants to
interesting that you bring that, the thinker, right?
do. Yeah.
One of the things I found in my quest for understanding words, and when I was in college, I got the prompting to go look up the word Satan in the dictionary at the university library. And of course, they've got that, A through L and M through Z that are like 4 inches thick, a lot of stuff in it. What I found really intriguing was the very first reference to the word was a Greek, Thetan, Thetan, which
Mhm.
means thinker.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, the wisdom traditions of the world say beware of thinking. If you think too much, you start to think that's all you are. And it's a useful but dangerous tool because
Mhm.
it's so divorced from relationship, it's divorced from emotion, it's divorced from the dynamic flow of life. That's the left hemisphere.
Sure.
Just can't, it loves
That's
static.
those 70,000 thoughts a day that we have, or, from the neuropsychologists or neuroscientists that say we have. I don't know how exactly to measure those, but, 75 or 70,000 thoughts a day, most of them are self-deprecating
Mhm. Yeah.
at
From
this
our
point.
early undercare. Yeah.
Right. So is it possible that as adults, is that they need the touch,
Yes.
the love,
Yes. Yes.
the aspects of loving and being loved and moving through the trauma so that we can harvest the past, not necessarily drag it with us and have it affect our future rather than, harvesting it and having it nourish the future in ways that are more applicable to life and living.
Yes, I talk about re-nesting ourselves as adults. We all need the nest throughout life. And if you are under cared for, your right hemisphere is a little not quite there, all in its fullest form. The best way to learn is to play with a child, 0 to 6, or maybe
Hmm.
1 to 6 years old, because they're in that flow, right? And they'll expect you to be in the moment. This is, holistic play like chase or tag or wrestling or, creative things, not playing with a board game or something.
Sure.
And
Just the
so
physical interaction
yeah,
without anything else.
yes, and they are ready to, and if you're not in the present moment reacting back and forth, they're not going to play with you anymore. So you have to learn to be in the present moment, try to figure out what your playmate's going to do and then you end up loosening all that stuff of adults have such, rigid ways of thinking about themselves. And what happens with play is your right hemisphere is going to grow. So
Mhm.
whatever keeps you in the present moment where you have to be creatively responding, and dance can do this and arts
Right.
of various kinds, that's going to grow your right hemisphere. It's going to make you more empathic, more flexible, more attuned.
So what I hear you saying, it doesn't necessarily grow. The neurocircuitry becomes better defined.
Yeah, you're growing brain connections.
Right. Yeah, new connections. I
Yeah,
think of growing and I'm thinking, "Whoop," and no, that's not necessarily
grow
correct.
connections. Yeah,
But there are, those billions, trillions, maybe even um, a Googleplex of connections, right, in our
right,
brain.
right. So I always recommend that for adults. The arts and play are the best things, and then to
What if those aren't available? Because those kinds of things obviously are going to bring you down to, and I don't mean bring you down, but connect you with a more baseline activity of loving and being loved, because that's all you can do in those situations, right? How do you, or how do you see or recommend in other situations where that's not available? For instance, today, like in the workplace, the many
Hmm.
folks are there, they don't necessarily have kids, but they act like kids still, right? Disconnected kids. How do we reconnect?
Well, at evolvenest.org, we have various tools of 28 days of nature connection, for example, based on an experiment we published about a few years ago. We have
Hmm.
28 days of solo play. Learn to play, you can do it by yourself. And I mean, even in the workplace, you can have your wastebasket farther away, and then you can throw a ball into it every now and then, whatever, something to loosen you up.
Yeah,
Uh, and bring a smile to your face. So it's finding the partners, people who can be silly with you. Playing charades is great, that kind of thing. So to be specific, I'd have to know the situation, but
sure,
yeah,
sure. I think I was looking for more the generalized as to, what can be done. And you're right, it it would seem the more playful you can become in the workplace, probably the more productive you would be. And I think there's a lot of companies today who have shifted to that. I know Infusionsoft, which is now Keep, their office is a quarter mile away, and they have all kinds of areas for play.
yeah, that's good.
Google's the
Music,
same way.
yeah.
Now, in the workplace, though, it's traditionally been a command and control structure. How do we shift that to one that's more of, I'm not sure servant leadership is the right term, but that's kind of more, because you're paying attention to the welfare of the people, not the production rates.
Yeah. Before I answer that, just one other thing people can
Sure.
do is use music. So to hum, to sing to yourself even, or, the chain gangs, they always sing a song together, or people working in the fields and, across the world. They have these songs to help themselves get into a rhythm of the work. And then they're stimulating their vagus nerve, which makes all your health, your systems,
Yeah,
your organs of the body healthy, and connects you to your body, and it's just
sure.
marvelous. So using music in different ways, I think, is really important. I was a music major in college and music teacher in classrooms. So,
I'm a progressive drummer and have been for
yeah,
30 or 40 years at least. So I can relate to that. Music is the language of the soul, right? And depending, especially in jam sessions like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about in Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience, it's like a jazz quartet that's jamming. Time disappears, ego disappears, your instrument and you become one, and you're conversing with others.
yeah. And
And
the Danes during the pandemic, they would sing together online or out their window, and they had these songs they sang together. That was like, wow, that really brings the community together. Our hunter-gatherer cousins do this routinely, regularly, having dancing and singing, and they say even that you can't really receive the spirit, the great spirit, unless you're dancing. So let's get out there,
well, yeah, because you lose your inhibitions. You let go of what you think you should do, and you allow yourself just to be free.
Yeah.
As the music reference too, it triggered a memory of uh, a guy that I met when I was in the aerospace industry. I was working as an expediter at the time. He was a test tech, and we had that eye contact initially, and kind of like something's going on, and we would start communicating by lines from songs.
Yeah.
That's all we did for probably a couple of months. It was like this was this game we would play. Didn't seem, but maybe, a couple of times a night in my travels, but we would do that. And eventually we became friends, and we started studying the I am teachings together,
Hmm.
which was a really wonderful period as well. And those are, some of the things about what do they call them, ascended masters, and how they are able to transcend time and space and materiality simply because they've advanced to that level of consciousness that we're talking about, where they're completely interconnected with, for lack of a better, the cosmos within them.
Yeah.
Fascinating things. And we read stuff like that and we think it's all fiction.
Mm.
Tain't necessarily so.
No. In our hunter-gatherer civilization, we spent 99% of our existence on the planet in this kind of civilization. It's only the less than 1% of time that civilization showed up.
Mhm.
Now we have all these hierarchies. But in those societies, they are not only developmentally nested, that means they're providing those 9 components I
Mhm.
mentioned for children and everybody. But they also have a deep nestedness. So they have that a vertical nestedness to Earth's ways and deep roots in the Earth and its systems, but also to the cosmos. You feel always connected. You're never disconnected. You're never alone. You're never, isolated. And then they
Mhm.
have a vertical nestedness. I'm sorry, a horizontal, that you link to your ancestors and the ancestral wisdom, and you are always concerned about future generations, and what
Mhm.
actions you take are affecting
Yeah.
everything. So you're very
Well, the
careful.
council choices or council decisions that 7 generations prior, 7 generations in the future before they make any major choice as to what to do in the present.
Yeah.
That's a phenomenal, large scope, holistic view that today, because of the rapid production and consumerism, we've just gotten out of touch with that. Maybe we're doing the best we can with what we have because that's what we're being told. And maybe we haven't really got to the point where we have to question ourselves, which we had the opportunity to just a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, right? The obsession on self-hygiene and sequestration gave folks a chance to sit and self-examine. What do you see came out of that? so far? What are the indicators that there is a shift that you can see? Because it's been told via, prophecy and calendars and all kinds of stuff for millennia that we're in this period and that there's a great transformation either in process or about to occur. So reflecting on that, how do you actually see that, or do you? And what's the evidence that maybe others might be able to spot as well to help bolster their faith in the connectedness that's taking place?
Well, I don't spend my time looking at that. I'm trying to get people to do the evolved nest and re-nest
Mhm.
themselves. But I do know that there's movements for localization of living, right? So to eat locally, to live in a way,
Regenerative culture,
yeah,
right? The
regenerative based.
bioregional specific stuff.
Right, instead of, buying apples from New Zealand that are the same apples you raise in your neighborhood, but then they get transported across the world to someone else. It's all kind of crazy system that raises the GDP, right? But, look at all
Mhm.
this we're doing. So the focus, I think most people are spending their time though in a crisis mode, at least families are in the States. They don't get enough support, and they don't have parental leave, paid parental leave. They don't have a sense that the community is supporting them having children in many cases. So you're not going to just be able to
Kind of a
win
result
it.
of capitalism, right?
Contemplate.
And
Yeah, it's capitalism is the problem, the kind that we have now. You
so
need to
how would
have
you
time to contemplate, to be able to receive the messages from afar, from other
absolutely,
realms, right? And we don't
yeah.
give people much time for that anymore.
So how do you, so we have this capitalist environment. We have the obvious need for giving, which isn't really a part of the capitalist mindset. And yet that seems to be what's making it out of balance. And there's some who, like in the US, we do have a social system. A lot of people take advantage of it. And yet there's still a disconnect because if you work or you try to do something with your life, there's certain levels that you reach that if you get beyond it, you can't get any more service, but you don't have enough to actually live on yet.
Yeah.
So there's this disparity and whether it's on purpose or not, who cares? How can we, do you think, this your work with the Evolved Nest can promote this at a level that actually is practical and pragmatic in society that could be easily implemented? I don't know. I'm asking these questions because excuse me, I'm curious of what we can do, right? There's got to be ways. There are people like you who've been doing this work for the majority of your life, right? You've had this stream that you've been floating down, if you will, or paddling up, depending. Does this activity, what's the practical things that can be applied that make sense and bring us to a new level of understanding of each other so that we can begin to loosen these ties on the materialism and the capitalism? Not that it's bad, right? That we need to shift the agenda from profit over people and planet to people and planet over profit. How do you see that happening? And or do you? Or is that something that you're even aware of in the work that you do?
Well, it's very complicated because we have the
Absolutely is.
financialization. Investors are kind of running the world now. Wherever they want to invest is where then things happen, and it's all about money making. So it's
Again, back to that attention, intention, and interaction, right? That's the direction they're going.
right. And so we have to come back to localization and have local investment and put your money in the local community bank rather than in the big banks, for example. I mean, there's so many layers and levels of things that have to change.
Mhm.
But my work is focused on trying to make people aware that we don't have to be so miserable. Most of our all our ancestors
That's a
virtually
choice too, right?
we're stuck in this system though. It's a mega machine now. It just wants to feed on the world and destroy everything. Capitalism doesn't care about life. It's the left brain gone wild. This fake stuff, money is better than anything else. It's our highest
Right.
priority.
But you
Yeah.
use the word communism or socialism, and you get most of them going, whoa, wait a minute. No,
Well,
right?
yeah, the billionaires have convinced us, that no, this is the best way. So-called free marketism, which is
Sure.
crazy. It's just only recent. It's only the last few hundred years old, these ideas, and yet they're destroying the planet. So
Right.
come
And
on,
we
let's
talk
get
about
back.
hybridization. Do you think it's possible that there could be a hybrid model that's going to emerge?
Well, I suppose so, but we really have to, in our hunter-gatherer civilizations, they don't allow big egos. So if the hunter is successful with gets a big animal or something, the other hunters with him will start teasing him and say, "Oh, it's so small. We could go back and get a rabbit would be bigger." And they've
Right. Right.
tease and tease and tease until he starts to laugh,
Yeah. Yeah.
the silliness. And when they're asked, "Why do you do that?" "Oh, if we didn't do that, he would be dangerous. He could kill us." So they knew that if you had a big ego, if your ego starts to inflate, you get less. And we know from psychology experiments,
Sure.
people with more privilege are less empathic to those who don't have it, right?
Absolutely.
And they knew this, and they have control systems for it. Ridicule. So especially the elder women in the group, the band, will tease anybody who's getting too big for their britches. And
Hmm.
here in our system, we reward those big fat egos, right?
Right.
Then
But
all
we
we
got all kinds of
elegant.
hierarchies and pyramids with alpha
Yeah,
males or females at the
yeah,
top that are competing with each other that have no clue about how to build community.
right. Yeah. So somehow we have to, one of my ideas is to bring babies to boardrooms because when you hold a baby as a male,
Well,
your
that sounds like a great program. That's a
testosterone
slogan.
goes
Baby's
down.
the boardroom, right?
Yes, testosterone goes down, empathy can go up then, and you feel like, oh, I have to worry about the child's future or whatever, it starts to
Well,
change your
whether they
neurobiology.
think about it or not, I had this, I met a woman shaman years ago that was trained in the Huna way. And she was demonstrating the size of the aura, how we could measure it using dowsing rods.
Hmm,
And she used three positions to do that, the past, the future, and the present.
hmm,
And she took me through it. We did it, 40-foot square room. She's on the corner on the hypotenuse. I'm in the other corner. And she has me focus in the past and the future and walks towards me, clears the rods, walk towards me, and where they open, she has me open my eyes and we mark the spot. And she goes back to the past first and the future. And then she picks up a rock in the windowsill and puts it in my hand and says, now focus on this. The past and the future opened about 6 feet in front of me, almost identical spot. She barely got 2 steps in from the other side of the room in the present. So that went from 6 feet to 50 feet approximately, just by being in the present moment. So a baby is going to carry that energy, and their auric field is huge in comparison to the little ones and the adults in the room.
ah, that's
So
great.
that kind of seeps through too on an energetic level, whether we're aware of it or not. Again, we can't think our way through the system built on vibration. We've got to sense our way through, and our bodies operate that way. It's our heads that get in the way because we have free will. We can choose. How do
Yeah.
we make better choices and tune into those indicators that offer some inkling of, oh, I need to think differently about this?
Well, I always think it starts with neurobiology, although an idea can capture you, but you've got to put yourself in a place like hold the baby. We evolved in multi-generational, multi-gender bands, small bands, right? That where you're always around children, not separated from them the way we do that with guys now, right?
Right.
Then testosterone levels keep going out of out of control, and they start fighting and taking risks
Mhm.
that hurt everyone else. So Yeah, we have to pay attention to your body and where you are and how you feel in the moment. When your jaw
Oh,
starts to
but
get
that's too weird. I can't do that.
tight, when you're, start to hunch down, pay attention and try to avoid those situations or try to learn how to calm yourself because once you get in the bracing mode, again, your openness and your open-heartedness and your
A lot of
ability.
times you're completely unaware that that's
Yeah.
happening until somebody says, "Oh, why?" Right? Or do you notice that? And those kinds of, and which is an example of caring, right? That's that openness where you inquire of another so that they can look at themselves and maybe gain insight of their own activity and the possibility of change that then becomes present.
And we need to learn how to do that in a kind and compassionate way that's maybe even playful or because it's so easy to, jump on people.
Sure.
And then they get more scared and then they shuts down, right? So we're not
Sure.
very skilled at that these days.
Active listening and communication skills, emotional intelligence, those things.
Nonviolent communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot that individuals can do these things. I think all of us, if we're if we contemplate in whatever form we do that, meditation or whatever, we can increase our aura, right, of loving kindness. And we can then move in the world and have an effect even without conscious, action.
Sure. And you
Yeah.
can even do it more consciously. I had a friend teach me this little technique, really simple. You make a list of the people that you know, have the ones that you got problems with at the top of the list, and you go in and visualize their face, look into their eyes, and say, I love you. Our purpose is oneness.
Yeah. Nice.
And that practice alone, it's just the changes that come, the shifts in the sensations in the body. And because what you want to do is stay in that judgment, right? Because you're
Yeah.
angry at them. They
Well,
did
it's because
something
it
good by you.
protects your ego. So the
Oh
ego is
yeah.
a buffer,
Well,
for
there's no ego without we go.
yeah.
You got to be together or it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
in that expression of love, you may not feel it completely, but you're making the effort to be there, which is the most, you're putting yourself in that place, right? Like you were talking about.
Mhm. Yeah. You're suggesting to yourself too to shift
Right.
that way. Hmm.
It's a cool process. Do you have anything that in your, do you have anything in your nest that addresses those kinds of things in applicable ways or easy techniques or things that you offer across the spectrum? And maybe it's age specific, I don't know, because we do have certain things that we listen to at certain points of our maturation process, where we may not be open when we're younger, we're listening a little better when we're older. Do you have some things that you offer that can lead others into that direction?
Well, at evolvednest.org, we have 28 days of self-calming. So you can take up a practice, each day you do this thing throughout the day and then a new one the next day, and then find out which one works for you, which really
Mhm.
helps you. So we try to have different tools. We have the Evolve Nest curriculum that you can download where it explains why is this important, what's it like, what does it mean, and then how about you, or how you can apply it in your workplace or at home. And then how about you today? Did you get enough touch? All right, here's some suggestions if you didn't, or so it's trying to help people move into a space where nesting is sort of the thing you do. You
Right.
do it with others, you help others feel nested, and you help yourself feel nested, and then that calmness and
Sure.
that sereneness will help you then be more open and flexible to the changes that are happening, right? And you'll see better. You'll have the clarity to notice what is life giving instead of death oriented. Our system is so oriented to killing and death,
Hmm.
cannibalizing life, the Wetiko virus, the Native Americans call it. It just consume. And then, capitalism does that, it just consumes. And then what? You got a wasteland. You got some products though, you got a whole building full of plastic something.
Yeah, you got a warehouse full of toilet paper.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are
Um,
things we can do, but the mega system can be brought down by the cracks. A
sure.
complex system can suddenly shift when all these cracks have happened, and
Well,
each time
subtle
it's a
energy
crack.
shifts cause huge changes if they're followed, when they are followed through. Now, from what you're talking about, some of the work that I do with Planetary Citizens, I break down the co-creation wheel that came out of Spiral Dynamics in order to look at the areas of that, the sectors of society, what fits where, and who's pioneering in those areas. And one of those is the education and learning sector, which seems to be what you fit into. And so what we've done there is we've broken down each of the sectors and some of the activities that can happen at local levels that people can engage, because a lot of us don't know, right?
Right.
So in this larger holistic system, I'm looking at, as we talked before, in the mission that I was given as a teenager, right? How do we establish harmony among people and planet? Well, we look at it from a holistic systems perspective first, just like the universe. It's a holistic system. We pare things down as humans thinking that they're all separate and we need to put them in categories and boxes and all kinds of stuff. And, but we don't know how to read the labels on the boxes yet, let alone open lids. Do you see that this kind of effort also could lead towards a greater consideration and maybe a pondering at least, or a preponderance of the evidence that does show that, yeah, these things work? Do you see that based on what you know about the human relations, our society as it is today? Do you feel those possibilities exist for bringing us into greater balance within a few generations?
Of course, yes. I think the possibilities are there. I think my impression of a lot of these models, I guess, for transformation is they tend to be rather anthropocentric, right? I mean, we are members of the Earth community. We're the younger siblings of, very young compared to all these other mosses that have been around for 400 million years. We've been only
Right.
around for 2 million, and we think we know everything, right? No, we have much to learn from the animals and plants around us, as the Native Americans tell us. And so we have to include them in our circle of life,
Sure.
include
And they
them in our
communicate whether we realize it or not. The more
right.
time you spend in nature, the more you realize that. My wife and I were having we were having a conversation on the back porch one night, and I kept hearing this buzzing. It was a deep conversation, middle of the night, couldn't sleep, so we got up to go outside and talk. And I kept hearing this buzzing, and we're talking about self-awareness. And I'm looking around and can't find it. And then all of a sudden I look up and here's a bee in the center of the dome light on the porch. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, right? Oh, wow, bee light. And so I shared that with Luba. We both had a laugh. And I said, now, wait a minute. If this is a message to us and that connectedness exists, I wonder if we can deeper that awareness and see if the bee will change its trajectory around the light, because it was right in the center of it and it wasn't moving. And so we took another breath, went inside a little further, and sure enough, it changed its trajectory. Now it was going in about a 6-inch diameter circle. And I said, okay, once is, random, let's see if we can go to twice and see if there's actually a pattern here. So we took another breath and deepened, and sure enough, it went to the perimeter of the light, buzzed around it, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, and finally flew off. That kind of interaction is what we miss. It seems so incredulous. And he's like, yeah, right. You just, you saw random things and you put them all together so they made sense for you. Well, isn't that what we do?
Right. Beautiful. Wonderful story.
And all these things are available, right? Like you're talking about, spend time in nature, develop that connection, just go sit somewhere.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you found for you personally that you can offer on a daily shifting practice, if you will,
Mm.
that or opening or being available? what are some of the things that you could suggest to our audience that might work for them?
Well, having time in the morning, I especially like it then, but anytime during the day is possible to get connected with the 4 or 6 directions. And in contemplation, I've noticed that I have various spirit guides in the form of animals and in each direction. And I have movements that go with welcoming them and inviting them to guide me for the day.
Hmm.
And having a sense that the spirit world's all around us.
It really
And
is.
yeah, and to not be afraid. I think fear is one of the plagues of the Western world. So to get back in your
Well, it's a
body,
sense of giving up your power, right? That's what we think, that we're giving up our power, we lose our individuality. Just the opposite happens.
yeah, that's ego. But I think there's the more deeper neurobiology. If the child has been left alone and left to cry in the first year of life in particular, they don't feel secure in the world in that body. And so it takes a lot of healing to try to get to that very pre-conscious level.
Hmm.
So it's not just ego, it's also just kind of a not being welcomed
Right.
here.
It's this sense of disconnection and the restoration of a connection that may not have been there post-birth,
Right. So you have to go almost pre-birth to feel secure. Yeah.
which is that connection in the nothingness that we have and return
Yeah.
to, if we so choose, right?
Right. And so to let go of that rigid, fixed identity or ego that we are encouraged to have, what do you think? What do you want? Always the you, instead of just going with the flow of interest,
Yeah.
of
Hey,
love.
you, relax. In this wonderful opportunity that we have as we're moving into a collaborative future far greater than the impossibility than we have had to date because of many factors. What do you see the future possibility in the short term being?
Well, people getting awakened to the importance of honoring relationship, of being reverent towards life in general, and not, letting go of ego is part of that. But that's a buffer. That's your shield from all the stress and trauma you've had. So to recognize that we are one, that everything's related, that we are a planet of a living sentient planet, and we are part of it. But
Yeah,
to realize, oh, I'm on this web of life. I'm like a spider on a web, and everything I do reverberates everywhere else.
sure. And maybe an ongoing question might be, what is it like to love and be loved?
Mm, yeah,
And grow into that because as you're talking about, the sensations that exist there are dramatically different than in the fear-based ego complex.
yeah.
And you can feel it, you can sense it. That's your direct experience. Who can argue with that? You might try. It's like, which is what most of us still do. It's like, because we still got that programming running.
Yeah. So finding a sit spot you go to regularly in nature, and then to start to open your senses. We're very vision focused, right? In
Mhm.
the left
Yeah,
brain
close
is
your
that,
eyes and just sense.
but let your ears open, let your skin open and feel the things around you, and then let the communications flow. And you
Mhm.
started out with a rock, you know, you mentioned the rock. Ask a rock to be a companion for a while. Hold the rock in your hand and have a conversation and get back here in the present moment. So important to be present and not dissociated from your trauma or, worried about the future or worried about the past, depression, anxiety. come back to the present moment and be with the rock, right? Be with, and
Just
you let
be,
go open.
right?
Yeah, but it's being with, right?
Light.
Always, yes, we're always in relationship. What are you going to pick for your relationship?
Yeah.
Fear?
Yeah,
No, let's
absolutely.
pick love.
We're all in relationships in the ocean of emotion, trying to find safe harbor.
Yes. Mm.
Absolutely. Darsha, it has been just an absolute wonderful conversation that we've had today, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I know that the audience have picked up tasty tidbits along the way, and I really appreciate your time, energy, insight, and wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed our conversation too, and I wish the best for everyone to find their pathway with, serenity. Serenity now, you'll be fine.
Absolutely. And thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
namaste and in-law catch. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I will see you next time.